Pastor Pete Nickel covered the material that I told him, but then I looked later and realized we had already covered those questions. But you guys were so kind, didn't say anything to him. So he covered on page 106, questions 3 through 4. He got incredibly far. But today we'll be starting on page 112. So I appreciate Pastor Pete Nickel. He said it was a vibrant discussion with people who know a lot about the Bible. So you guys were a good testimony to the hard work.
He was here, right?
I wasn't.
Our wedding was fun. The weather was great. My wife has a couple pictures that she can pass about. And
really want to pass them around?
do you guys want to see it?
Yes.
Yes? Are you surprised? They love Henry.
You didn't take a picture of me, though.
Wait, I'm
No.
cut out of that
All
one.
of that.
What?
Look at that. You guys cut me out of that.
It was the widescreen couldn't cover you big enough.
It's my shoulder right there.
But yeah, so Henry and Molly got married last Sunday afternoon and are moving to Milwaukee. They move into their duplex tomorrow. And he starts teaching at Martin Luther High School, and she's going to be doing graduate work at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. We're very excited for them, and we're excited we get a few more weeks with our son Lucas as well before he returns back to Michigan. It's been a fun summer for us, and hopefully you all are having good summers now. We're going to, in page 1, I said 112, we're actually on page 114, question 5 there, looking at Luke chapter 20. We've been in this study looking at Luke as a wonderful book that shines a light on the work of Christ, especially with the theme of journey, journeying towards Jerusalem. This session is about him arriving into Jerusalem now. And as he arrives into Jerusalem, we've got then in 19, the triumphal entry. He weeps over Jerusalem. He cleanses the temple. His authority gets challenged. He asked them a question I also ask you now. Tell me, was the baptism of John from heaven or from man? And then the next thing we have is a parable that he tells. And so this parable is going to have us start to look at that question of what Jerusalem is Jesus entering into. So if in chapter 19 he's got the triumphal entry, this parable is going to help us to start to think about what kind of Jerusalem does he enter into. And so I'll read from Luke chapter 20, verses 9 through 18. And he began to tell the people this parable. A man planted a vineyard and let it out to tenants and went into another country for a long while. When the time came, he sent a servant to the tenants so that they would give him some of the fruit of the vineyard. But the tenants beat him and sent him away empty-handed. He sent another servant, but they also beat and treated him shamefully and sent him away empty-handed. He sent yet a third. This one they also wounded and cast out. Then the owner of the vineyard said, "What shall I do? I will send my beloved son. Perhaps they will respect him." But when the tenants saw him, they said to themselves, "This is the heir. Let us kill him, so that the inheritance may be ours." And they threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. What then will the owner of the vineyard do to them? He will come and destroy those tenants and give the vineyard to others. When they heard this, they said, "Surely not." But he looked directly at them and said, "What then is this that is written? The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Everyone who falls on the stone will be broken to pieces, and when it falls on anyone, it will crush on him." All right, so we've got a parable, some opportunity to kind of draw some lines of who's who. The first question is, who's the owner? So who's the owner in our parable to represent?
God.
Yeah, so God the Father is there. Then we've got the servants. Who are the servants?
Prophets.
So it could be the apostles. It could be the prophets. John the Baptist. Yeah, I think especially in my head I'm seeing the prophets and John the Baptist. Kind of going back to that question when Jesus asked the apostles, "Who do people say that I am?" Some say prophet, some say Elijah, Some say John the Baptist. And just before this, he had asked the leaders about John the Baptist. So he had kind of planted the seeds of them remembering John the Baptist and how Herod had arrested him and killed him. And now you've got this. All right, the Son. Who's the Son represent? Jesus. Yeah, we got that one. All right, the vineyard. What is the vineyard?
The earth?
The earth? Maybe a little bit more specific than just the earth, though.
Us, the people.
The people, the vineyard could be Israel. It could be the place where God had, Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah describes how God had planted good grapes, but that wild grapes grew. The imagery of using a vineyard for Israel is a common one in the prophet Isaiah. And so in fact, let's go to look at Isaiah right now, Isaiah chapter 5, and see that. So Isaiah chapter 5, he writes, "Let me sing for my beloved my love song concerning his vineyard. My beloved had a vineyard on a very fertile hill. He dug it and cleared it of stones. He planted with choice vines. He built a watchtower in the midst of it. He hewed out a white vat in it. And he looked for it to yield grapes, but it yielded wild grapes. And now, O inhabitants of Jerusalem and men of Judah, judge between me and my vineyard. What more was there to do for my vineyard than I have not done in it? When I looked for it to yield grapes, why did it yield wild grapes? And now I will tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will remove its hedge, it shall be devoured. I will break down its wall, it shall be trampled down. I will make it a waste, it shall not be pruned or hoed, and briars and thorns shall grow up. I will also command the clouds that they rain no rain upon it. For the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah, and his pleasant planting. He looked for justice, but behold bloodshed, for righteousness, but behold an outcry." So Isaiah 5 has the vineyard. In verse 7, it's pretty specific there about the vineyard being the house of Israel. And he says, what more should I have done for it? I've done what I could. Now, what is going on in Jerusalem is going to be what we're going to look at next. So going back to Luke, there's the triumphal entry. Then you've got people complaining about Jesus. Then Jesus cleanses the temple. Then Jesus gets examined and questioned by what kind of authority he does these things. Everybody else see the picture so far? Looks like they can return back to my wife then. So let's keep in mind what the religious leaders had asked. So in chapter 20, verse 2, they ask, "Tell us by what authority you do these things, or who it is that gave you this authority." So how does the parable become a way for Jesus to answer this question? By what authority do you do these things? In the parable, by what authority does the son arrive to the vineyard?
It was given him by his father.
Yeah, the charge, the commission has been given to him by his father. Go to the vineyard and receive from the tenants the fruit of the vineyard. And instead the tenants, they beat him and they kill him. What is the response of the leaders to this parable? They say, surely not. The leaders, they understand that this parable is an accusation and that the vineyard is going to be taken away and given to others. And their response is, God can't take it away. Question 6 on our study sheet is going to what I was just highlighting. What does Jesus say the owner of the vineyard will do? So, look at verse 15. They threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. What then will the owner of the vineyard do to them? He will come and destroy those tenants and give the vineyard to others. Let's look back to chapter 19, verse 41, and see how this fits in with something Jesus has already said. When he drew near and saw the city, he wept over it, saying, Would that you, even you, had known on this day the things that make for peace. But now they are hidden from your eyes, for the days will come upon you when your enemies will set up a barricade around you, surround you, and hem you in on every side, tear you down to the ground, you and your children within you. And they will not leave one stone upon another in you, because you did not know the time of your visitation. So, what does this teach us? So you've got,
I kind of feel like Jesus is saying that people are looking for violence and they're looking for anger and they're looking for ways to kind of get ticked off. And so it's up to us to find the good in everybody and realize that in the end Jesus has the ultimate answer. That's what we should be seeking.
So there's a barricade, there's hemming, there's this violence that's arriving, and you're saying that Jesus is challenging the people to look for a different way?
Yeah.
Okay. What else does this tell us about the situation that Jesus is arriving into? Is he arriving into a city that has everything figured out in a good way? No, there's accusation in Jesus' words about what's going on in Jerusalem at this moment. This has us to think about now, is there continuity with the modern nation of Israel, with what is Israel promised in the scriptures? Is there a responsibility for us as Christians for the modern nation state of Israel? If you have Jesus saying in chapter 19 that they will not leave one stone upon another in you because you did not know the time of your visitation. Or in verse 16 of chapter 20, he will come and destroy those tenants and give the vineyard to others. Howard?
Iran has prophesied the total destruction of Israel.
Yeah.
So yes, there is connection.
There's a connection, and there's a connection of how much is what Jesus is saying is going to happened, and then now you've got this modern time. We keep living in a time, if you have any nation that abandons God and ignores God's servants, then that nation will experience kind of a destruction that happens. Okay. Paul writes about the concept of Israel and Christ in Romans chapters 9, 10, and 11. And in Romans chapter 9, 10, and 11, he does an interesting thing where he says that ultimately Israel becomes Jesus. And that Jesus becomes the fulfillment of the promise that's been made to Israel. So you have now this moment of where you've got Old Testament Israel as a people. Well, you first had as a man. Jacob becomes called Israel as he strives with God. Then you got this people, and the people struggle to believe and trust in God. So Jesus is sent. Jesus becomes the fulfillment of Israel. So like in Matthew, you've got Jesus coming out of Egypt, and as God has called his people out of Egypt. And then you have Jesus living, walking in obedience to the word of God. And then the promises that God will bring blessings through the people of Israel. Genesis chapter 12 and 13, you've got Abraham, I will bless you, and through you all the nations of the earth will be blessed. That this is happening in Jesus. So there's this Israel in one and Israel in all that is kind of when you look in what Israel is, the Israel we're talking about right here. Howard?
Is there a conflict between the spiritual Israel and the physical Israel? The perception is it's all about the physical world, but it's not.
Yeah, so Howard's highlighting spiritual Israel, which we could say is Jesus,
yeah.
and you got the physical Israel, which would be the land. one of the ways that we kind of try to distinguish through this is usually the people living in the biblical Israel of the scriptures will be called Israelites. And nomenclature for today's citizens of Israel would be Israelis, to try to show that there's a nomenclature difference between people there too. Jim?
I think there is a rebuke on Jesus' part to the Israelis or the people living in Jerusalem for having forgotten their past, because they are forgetting that the land that they are occupying formerly belonged to other people whom God drove out because of the way they were living. So they should have remembered, it seems to me, that if God could get rid of those people and give it to the Jews, he certainly is capable of doing that again. So it's...
We're all tenants.
Yes,
We're all
and-
visitors and sojourners in this land that God has made.
So it's a rebuke on one hand for them for forgetting their history and where that land came from.
Mhm.
And then it's a warning for them not to follow the ways of the Jebusites and all those various people who lived there before he expressly gave that land to the Jewish people. So it's a rebuke and it's a warning to live the right way. And I think that carries over to contemporary Israel as well, you know.
Or to us here too, that wherever we are, there's
Right.
a humbleness that I'm here by the grace of God. All right, let's look to Romans chapter 10 and just kind of remind ourselves of how the early Christians interacted with this conflict of tension between following Christ and the Old Testament promises to be God's people. So Romans chapter 10 says, "Brothers, my heart's desire and prayer to God for them is that they may be saved. For I bear them witness that they have a zeal for God, but not according to knowledge. For being ignorant of the righteousness of God and seeking to establish their own, they did not submit to God's righteousness. For Christ is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone who believes." So what is Paul saying his ambition is? What does he want God to do?
That they be saved.
That they be saved, yeah. And so there's kind of this conflict for me in trying to figure out how to read inside of Luke and in John and Matthew and in all of the New Testament, this interaction between the people that are resisting Jesus and wanting to almost capture them as enemies. And yet Paul is writing in Romans 10 a very heartfelt expression. It is my heart's desire and prayer to God for them is that they would be saved. And so this is the ongoing tension that Jesus is expressing when he says, "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how I weep for you." Or in the parable, how many times does the owner send someone to the vineyard? I mean,
4 times.
4 times. It's
3 servants and a son.
3 servants and a son. That there is a strong purposefulness in God continuing to reach. All right, now, yes, Howard.
You know, this speaks a lot to Paul's experience.
Yeah, Paul's experience, he writes in the Philippians, about his great bona fides, his resume is deep, and yet he says, "I consider that all rubbish compared to the surpassing greatness of knowing Christ Jesus as my Lord." That in the end, what is our foundation? What do we stand upon? Do we stand upon a land grant, a title? Do we stand upon this place of saying, "I've been here always"? Or I stand here because this is by the grace of God. This is kind of what you were pointing to, is that tension of the land you're on. Is it a land you deserve, or is it all gift?
I think there's a tie-in to the Old Testament reading about Sodom and Gomorrah as well, because how many times did Moses say, will you destroy them if they're 80 people?
Mhm.
Will you destroy them if they're 60 people? Will
Yeah.
you destroy them ultimately if they're 10? So he's pleading with them when destruction is threatened. Oh, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And I think that's a lesson for all of us in this divide. When you hear, I'm sure somebody in Pennsylvania heard that young man say, well, I'm going to I have this animus against President Trump, I'm going to assassinate him. Or in Denver, Colorado, when those elderly Jewish women were demonstrating to free the hostages and someone decided to throw a firebomb at them. I'm sure that there's somebody in that locality that should have spoken up and said, oh, please don't do that, don't do that.
Yeah.
So I think that's the challenge for us when we hear somebody.
To have that plea like Abraham did.
Right,
Yeah.
well, and on the other hand, we have the Jonah story when God was sparing Capernaum and Jonah was angry because God was letting him off easy. So
Yes.
that's what you don't want to do.
Yeah.
And here's what we're supposed to do.
Jonah spoke to Nineveh and then waited for Nineveh to get destroyed and then was frustrated when the people repented.
So here's what you should do and here's what you don't do. And what happened to Jonah as a result. So
Question 6b on our study sheet says, in 2017, what does the rejected stone refer to? What will happen to this rejected stone, and what does this mean in practice? What does this teach us about whom the vineyard will be given, i.e., who God's people really are? And so this is having us look at Luke chapter 20, verse 17. He looked directly at them and said, what then is this that is written? The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. And so here, what is the stone? What is that referring to?
That's referring to Jesus.
Yeah. Well, let's first, I think we're going to get there because I think you're right. Let's first look at it in some context. So turn to Psalm 118, verse 22.
Yeah.
Psalm 118. And the stanza starts in verse 19. So we're going to read Psalm 118, verses 19 to 24. And you'll find the verse that Jesus is quoting is in verse 22. Open to me the gates of righteousness that I may enter through them and give thanks to the Lord. This is the gate of the Lord. The righteous shall enter through it. I thank you that you have answered me and have become my salvation. The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. This is the Lord's doing. It is marvelous in our eyes. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. So let's start with the imagery of what a cornerstone is. Sometimes it will get translated as keystone. So interestingly, whether you're building a bridge or building a building, let's go first with cornerstone of a building. What those of you who have built things, let's just set aside the spiritual answers and just go with the physical reality. What does a cornerstone do?
A reference point.
It's a reference point. Okay, so tell me more about that.
That's where you start.
Well, it usually has a year on it as to when the building was
Yeah, so
constructed.
we have symbolic cornerstones now that have the year and things like that, and sometimes they're actually at a cornerstone or not. And you were talking about more of like a building's cornerstone.
You take your dimensions from it.
You set that
So
stone, and if it's off, what happens to the rest of the building?
the building's off.
The rest of the building is off, yeah. All right, and then we have more of the cornerstone, like right outside our door. It has the year on it, and sometimes inside the cornerstones are archival materials. What do they call those?
Time capsule.
Time capsules, yes. All right, now on a bridge, a keystone of a bridge. You're building the arch.
It's
What's
the
up?
It's what locks the arch together.
Yeah, it's the thing that. Anybody know why Pennsylvania is called the Keystone State?
because it joins New England to the south.
Are you guessing, or you know that?
Pardon?
Are you guessing, or I don't know?
My
That sounds
father's
like
from
it could be the
My father's
answer.
from Pennsylvania, so you have the Mid-Atlantic states joining.
All right. We'll run with that.
Yeah, I think we gotta.
All right, so a cornerstone is normally a very selected stone. It's going to be the straightest, the strongest, the one that all others can be kind of straight from. So there's an irony that's found in this verse. The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. So builders would reject it, and yet God's going to use it as the cornerstone. So now let's go with why would builders reject a cornerstone? Let's, again, not go with the spiritual answer right away. Let's go with the physical answer. What would be some things that could be wrong with a stone that would cause a builder to reject it in its usage as a cornerstone?
It's not straight.
It's not straight, okay. Lucas?
It's cracked.
It's got a crack in it.
Got the wrong date.
It's got the wrong date, yes. So now let's start to go with the spiritual answers now. Why would Jesus become a stone that would get rejected?
Well, they crucified him.
Yeah, so why do they do that?
It was out of power, but I mean,
Yeah, so they're afraid of Jesus? All right.
They didn't recognize it for who he was.
Yeah.
They missed the prophecies, either knowingly or whatever, I don't know.
They missed the goodness of Jesus. They saw other things. They saw he was from Galilee. They saw he was a carpenter's son. He didn't have any noble birth. Though he was from the line of David, his family,
Nobody.
His own home didn't recognize his.
yeah, his own people did not recognize him. His mother and brothers would come to him and say, "Come out of there." So there are reasons why people will reject Jesus.
It wasn't the way we usually do things in that era.
Yeah. He's
They're-
not,
they're- You know, the Hebrews and Pharisees, they're all put
He
out
was
a
not
certain,
what
this is
they
the way you
expected.
live. And
He
he's
does
saying
follow
that's
the
not-
law.
Not the way you live.
yeah, but he doesn't do it the way they thought. In fact, when he and his disciples are criticized for not washing their hands, and Jesus criticizes them for making the tradition of man more important than the Word of God. Now let's think ahead to today. What are some reasons people will reject Jesus today? Yes, Lucas.
They think they don't need him.
Don't need him. I don't need this cornerstone. I'm fine. I've already got enough building. I got my house. I got my job. I got my career. I got my family. I don't need
I
him.
don't know.
They think the Bible is just a story, not the Word of God.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable that we could really, it'd be that simple to be saved.
Yeah. 2,000 years later, and they'll look and they think this is not important. The same cornerstone that was rejected then still gets rejected today for very similar reasons. So why does God take that which would be rejected by the builders and make it a cornerstone? To help answer that question, I want you to remember the story of Gideon and his army. So the story of Gideon, he's a judge. The people are living difficult lives, and he finds Gideon, says he's a great warrior. Gideon calls together an army of 20,000 people. Then what does God say about that army of 20,000 people?
too big.
Too big! Well, how can an army be too big? Well, they'll take credit for the victory. And so he says, Gideon, tell the people, anybody that wants to go home, they can go home. So 10,000 people just leave right there. I don't have to be here, then I won't be here. And so then they take him to water, and it gets shrunk down to it's 300.
Yeah.
And now this is the army is the right size, because if they have victory, they know it can't be because of them. It has to be because God is at work. So the cross becomes this incredible demonstration of weakness, and yet power as well.
I think you could say that God uses people that we would least expect to show the limits of our intelligence. You could cite the example of David. I mean, nobody thought little David was up to bringing down gigantic behemoth Goliath, yet he did. Or you could bring up Samson, and who brought him down but this beautiful woman who knew or was motivated to clip the hair. And
then Samson's at his weakest, and yet there he's able to put his arms on the pillars, and he's blind, he's weak, and yet great strength arrives again.
And I think in our lifetime, you can have somebody with you're looking for an answer, and no one seems to be able to help you. Someone will approach you with just what you need. I mean, I don't know if anybody has had that happen. I mean, it's somebody that you're really not expecting, and you know what? It is exactly what you need to move forward.
So Brennan Manning, he wrote The Ragamuffin Gospel. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that book. It's a story about him being called to a parish in California. He was essentially told, go to this place and close it down, and then we'll find another place for you. There's nothing good there. And he ended up starting Homeboy Industries and kind of restarting that whole community life by the confidence that the stone that others rejected will become the cornerstone, that Christ can work in those places. All right, so we've answered the question about the rejected stone. The second question on our study sheet was, what does this teach us about whom the vineyard will be given to? So, what then is this that is written? The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone, and everyone who falls on that stone will be broken to pieces, and when it falls on anyone, it will crush him. What does this tell us about where the vineyard gets built?
The offer and the teaching of salvation was open to the Gentiles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And-
And were limited for the Israelites.
And we all will get crushed if we try to stand on our own. So there's this, everyone who falls on that stone will be broken to pieces. And when it falls on anyone, it will crush him. There's this incredible humility that has to be found by anybody that wants to build on this cornerstone.
And the reference Bible refers to the establishment.
Yeah.
That is
The man.
huge. When you
Let's go back to our 60s and 70s hippie moment, right? The man. But yeah, the establishment. Sorry to go off on a tangent there.
No,
But that is that challenge. Is someone else was saying the word power? Who? Rick, was that you talking about power?
Probably, I do that all the time.
Yeah. But so the question of Jesus arriving with the grace of God versus the power of the world, and the power of the world is always going to look for that perfect stone, and yet Jesus comes, and he is the perfect stone, but they don't see it. And so then people stumble on that stone, on others that stone falls. And so everyone who rejects him will be judged. This passage, it's one that helps us understand a larger context of the ministry and death of Jesus. So Jesus is arriving like the vineyard owner's son, is going to get rejected, and what happens to the vineyard? Is the vineyard completely abandoned? Yeah, Christy.
Well, like this, to whom the vineyard will be given to, who God's people really are. We're the second choice. You know, we're the leftovers. We're the crooked stones. We're kind of a mess.
Yeah.
But we still get that chance to be in God's kingdom.
It also fits into the, let's take a moment and go to Matthew chapter 21. I'm sorry, chapter 22. This theme of seconds comes up in Matthew 22 as well. It's a parable of the wedding feast. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding feast for his son, sent his servants to call those who were invited to the wedding feast, but they would not come. And again he sent other servants, saying, tell those who are invited, see, I have prepared my dinner, my oxen, my fat calves have been slaughtered. Everything is ready. Come to the wedding feast. But they paid no attention, went off to his farm, another to his business, while the rest seized his servants, treated them shamefully, and killed them. The king was angry. He sent his troops, destroyed those murderers, burned their city, and then he said to his servants, the wedding feast is ready, but those invited were not worthy. Go therefore to the main roads and invite to the wedding feast as many as you may find. And those servants went out into the roads, gathered all whom they found, both bad and good, so the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to look at the guests, he saw there was a man who had no wedding garment. And he said to him, friend, how did you get in here without a wedding garment? He was speechless. Then the king said to the attendants, bind him hand and foot, cast him into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen. So this theme of seconds is not meant for us to say we're better than the first. I mean, because the seconds had no reward for why they should be chosen either. It's entirely God's working. God is the one who sends out and keeps inviting. And we're going to keep reading now back in Luke chapter 20. And we'll read now Luke chapter 20 verses 19 through 21 through 4. And this is going to get us to the question about Caesar and resurrection, and this question about a psalm that had predicted that the Messiah would be a son of David, but also Lord of David. So there's not a great unifying, simple way to put all these together, but we'll find a way. So the scribes and the chief priests sought to lay hands on him at that very hour, for they perceived that he had told this parable against them, but they feared the people. So they watched him and sent spies who pretended to be sincere, that they might catch him in something he said, so as to deliver him up to the authority and jurisdiction of the governor. So they asked him, "Teacher, we know that you speak and teach rightly and show no partiality, but truly teach the way of God. Is it lawful for us to give tribute to Caesar or not?" But he perceived their craftiness and said to them, "Show me a denarius. Whose likeness and inscription does it have?" They said, "Caesar's." He said to them, "Then render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." They were not able in the presence of the people to catch him in what he said, but marveling at his answer, they became silent. There came to him some Sadducees, those who deny that there is a resurrection, and they asked him a question, saying, "Teacher, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies, having a wife but no children, the man must take the widow and raise up offspring for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers. The first took a wife and died without children. The second and the third took her, and likewise all 7 left no children and died. Afterward the woman also died. In the resurrection, therefore, whose wife will the woman be? For the 7 had her as wife." And Jesus said to them, "The sons of this age marry and are given in marriage, but those who are considered worthy to attain to that age and to the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage, for they cannot die any more, because they are equal to angels and are sons of God, being sons of the resurrection. But that the dead are raised, even Moses showed in the passage about the bush, where he calls the Lord the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Now he is not God of the dead, but of the living, for all live to him." Then some of the scribes answered, "Teacher, you have spoken well," for they no longer dared to ask him any question. But he said to them, "How can they say that the Christ is David's son? For David himself says in the book of Psalms, 'The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool.' David thus calls him Lord. So how is he his son?" And in the hearing of all of the people, he said to his disciples, "Beware of the scribes, who all like to walk around in long robes and love greetings in the marketplaces and the best seats in the synagogues and the places of honor at feasts, who devour widows' houses and for a pretense make long prayers. They will receive the greater condemnation." Jesus looked up and saw the rich putting their gifts into the offering box, and he saw a poor widow put in 2 small copper coins, and he said, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all of them, for they all contributed out of their abundance, but she out of her poverty put in all she had to live on." So this is the text we're working with now. We've got a series of questions, and then Jesus asks a question, and then Jesus makes an observation. So let's first look at the question about the taxes to Caesar. Presumably, people don't like paying taxes. So we've got this question. They asked him, "Teacher, we know that you speak and teach rightly and show no partiality, but truly teach the way of God. Is it lawful for us to give tribute to Caesar or not?" So, who you pay taxes to starts to illustrate who you are subject to. So we pay taxes as residents of Michigan because we live in Michigan and live under the authority of the governor, and we pay taxes to the federal government because we are citizens of the United States. And even, interestingly, if you are abroad and you are a citizen of the United States, you have taxes that you owe to the federal government because you have placed yourself in subject to the federal government. So people paying taxes to Caesar is an illustration that they see themselves, if you pay the tax to Caesar, as living under the authority of Rome. To avoid paying taxes would be to, say, avoid that definition of who I am, living under the authority of Rome. And so they're asking, does Caesar have authority over us? That's kind of the question about tribute. Is it lawful for us to pay tribute to Caesar? Is it lawful for us as people of God to live under the authority also of Caesar? Especially when Caesar claims to be God. Nero, other Caesars would all set up statues of themselves and temples. And one of the accusations that later became of Christians is that they were atheists because they did not honor the Roman gods, especially the god of the emperor. So this question of paying taxes. What does Jesus say about this?
Go ahead and pay them.
Yeah, he perceives their craftiness, and he shows them a denarius whose likeness inscription does it have. He wants them to say out loud, who's on this coin? Caesar. And so he says, give to Caesar's what is Caesar's. So this is a remarkable moment of conflict for us. What belongs to Caesar and what belongs to God? Everything belongs to God, but some things belong to Caesar? How do we figure that out?
I pay a guy to do it.
You pay a guy to do it. Yes. By the way, I'm just curious. Who does their own taxes? One, two. Yeah. Very few. Remarkably few. How many people are happy with the guy who's doing their taxes? All right. So interestingly, most of the people who are not paying for their taxes are happy. So that's a good sign.
I think the issue is when you get to our age, and most of us, sometimes it gets so convoluted that you have to have somebody there that understands the taxes. Because they change them every year.
Yeah. So, what does the answer that Jesus gives in verse 25 mean? Then render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's.
He's really telling them that he's not the Messiah they're looking for. They're looking for a different Messiah.
They're looking for a Messiah that will take away all power from Caesar and place all power in his own hands.
And he's saying, I'm not that guy.
I'm not the guy that's going to overturn Caesar. So who does Jesus overturn?
Satan.
Satan, sin and death, yeah. So how do you figure out what belongs to Caesar? Yeah, Debbie?
I was just gonna say, God is a God of order.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you live in a country, you should pay the taxes
Yeah.
for where you live.
To kind of get towards that, let's take a moment and look at Romans chapter 13. So in Romans 13, he writes, let every person be subject to the governing authorities. For there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval, for he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain, for he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. Therefore one must be in subjection, not only to avoid God's wrath, but also for the sake of conscience. For because of this you also pay taxes, for the authorities are ministers of God, attending to this very thing. Pay to all what is owed to them, taxes to whom taxes are owed, revenue to whom revenue is owed, respect to whom respect is owed, honor to whom honor is owed. So how does Paul's passage help us interpret this question of render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's and the things to God? I want to share with you that there was one interpretation of Jesus' statement that was kind of, this commentary was saying, render the things to Caesar, nothing belongs to Caesar, so just give it all to God. And so the idea was they were interpreting, render to the things to Caesar that belongs to Caesar, and since nothing belongs to Caesar, give it all to God. And so this commentator, I think, was advocating essentially for a utopia of a spiritual society that had no reliance on civic government, because all civic government is just civic. So using the principle that Scripture interprets Scripture, Romans 13 becomes a good counterbalance to that kind of interpretation.
Designation here is that the authority of God has total authority over both.
Yeah.
And we tend to think, well, no, they're the ungodly and we're the godly.
So
God's got power over both.
it's not as a binary, either God or Caesar, but all is God. And so give the things that are to Caesar, the things that are Caesar, knowing that God is working over that. Okay, yeah.
I think in this time when everyone is so heavily scheduled, I think we're at a point where your time is almost equivalent to your money. And if you can judge someone by where I spend my money is what I value, I think you might also suggest that where people spend their time is also an indication of what they value. So if God has a right for you to expect, a tithe or a contribution, with everyone so heavily scheduled, and I think the younger generation is super scheduled. Remember what God says, the one thing needful is that, He has a right for you to show yourself at church or spend some time, because I think it's easy for people, a lot of people, to write a check, but it's awful hard to find a couple of hours to do, maybe to come to church or to do a Bible study. So time, was it Ben Franklin said time is money? I think we're almost there.
And then in the same respect as Paul's writing in the Romans, honor to where honor is owed, that our time in civic engagement should be there as well then. Okay. So where does the Revolutionary War fit into Romans 13? So by what authority did the colonialists in America revolt?
Freedom.
Taxation,
It,
which was not freedom.
it was a taxation. All right, so but Paul writes, taxes to whom taxes are owed. So
That's right.
maybe you got to remember your July 4th, 1776 Declaration of Independence. What did they say was the authority by which they were revolting?
It was taxation without representation.
Yeah, so they said that God had given authority to government, and when the government becomes tyrannical and operates apart from the evidences of what God has established government for, then it is the duty and the responsibility of a people to stand up and resist against that unjust authority. I kind of run through Romans 13 with 1776 becomes an interesting example of when do we revolt? And when do we just say, let's wait 4 years and elect someone different?
Don't we as a church sometimes neglect our responsibility to inform government of who's really in charge?
Yeah, so how did the people in 1776 know that the government had become tyrannical? If you're interested in some interesting ways that pastors look through this, look up about Pastor Muhlenberg. Pastor Muhlenberg, part of the Pennsylvania Ministerium, part of first Speaker of the House. Is noteworthy for having been both a pastor and a colonel in the colonial army, and how he navigated that duty he had to both respect Romans 13 and see it challenge this.
Didn't the government go way beyond what they should have done at that time?
Yeah.
Because not only were they the government and taking taxes, but they also occupied our cities. They brought troops in and put them in there to make sure that people followed what they were supposed to be following. So it was more than just a government.
It wasn't a government for the people, by the people.
Yes.
It was a government forced upon the people.
Correct.
How different is that than Caesar? So Roman government was forcing, you could force anybody to carry your bag a mile. The Roman government forced poll taxes. The Roman government forced its, they got rid of the Jewish leader in the Tetrarch of Jerusalem and placed Pontius Pilate as a governor there instead. And yet Jesus says, give to Caesar the things that are Caesar's. And I don't have all the answers. I'm not trying to be a loyalist.
Maybe there was no difference.
But
Difference was we won.
So in the end, what is Jesus doing in Luke 20 when they, in craftiness, are trying to capture him? Jesus is not trying to give a complete answer for understanding 1776. Why does Jesus answer the way he does is, I think, something that Rick pointed out at the beginning of this conversation is Jesus wasn't the Messiah they were looking for. And this becomes now a bridge to understand a Christian responsibility inside, say, the 18th century, is that the colonialists revolted against England not because of a spiritual Messiah confusion, but because of a broken government. Compared to in Luke 20, they were asking, is it permissible for us to revolt against Rome for a spiritual reason? And Jesus is like, no. Give to Caesar the things are Caesar's, the things to God's. The revolt's not going to come because I'm your Messiah that's going to turn over Rome. The revolt could come because Roman government has fallen apart and there needs to be a new government. But it's not because I'm the Messiah that's going to do that. So Luke 20, and this question about Caesar, is not really a great filter to explain everything that happens in Christians during revolutions. But it does give us an expectation to say, even when we do say, as Christians in a civic society participate in a revolution, we are not instituting a messianic Christian utopia in doing that. We are just getting a new government. And so that question that Rick brought up, it's not the Messiah they were looking for. That Jesus isn't arriving to be the Messiah to turn over Rome. He's becoming the Messiah to turn over sin. Maybe a way to kind of filter through that vein. Yeah,
I like that. That's good.
you were the foundation of it, so don't worry.
I like that even better.
Now let's look at the Sadducees. Sadducees ask about the resurrection. So we get a note from Luke in verse 27. There came to him some Sadducees, those who deny that there is a resurrection. There are times when you try to wonder, how much do I need in secondary material to be able to read the scriptures? Do I need to become an expert in first century Jewish politics with all my other library shelves? Luke is helpful. I think this is the inspiration of the scriptures, that the Holy Spirit realizes not everybody is going to read this text with a first century listening experience. So Luke provides us this detail. Like, you don't have to have read in Josephus or anywhere else about Sadducees. It's sufficiently clear right here in this verse. And that's the gift of the scriptures. Ultimately, the scriptures are sufficient enough. It's great to have a lot of secondary sources, but the scriptures are sufficient. So the Sadducees, those who deny that there is a resurrection, they asked him a question saying, "Teacher, Moses wrote for us." And then they've got this convoluted, I'm still saying it wrong, but you know what I mean, story about divorce. What is the trick in their question? What do they think is going to confuse Jesus?
The number of marriages.
Yeah.
Without children.
And
Be the wife in heaven.
who's going to be the wife? He didn't have any children. Almost the notion is, if one of those arrangements of the wife and the brothers, if one of those had given children, then that would have been the family, the thought was, I guess. But since there weren't children in any of those, how much of it is a marriage? And so this becomes a noteworthy concept of, is any marriage without children still a marriage, is kind of what they're starting to go to. They're going down a rabbit hole, and Jesus doesn't dig in that rabbit hole. Well, instead, he shows them wrong. So let's look at his answer again.
Question,
Yeah.
didn't the Sadducees not believe in life after death? And so, how is this question meaningful?
They're trying to show the ridiculousness of those like the Pharisees who did believe in resurrection. And so they're asking a question that they believe can have no good answer. And that any answer Jesus tries to provide will show the ridiculousness of individual resurrection. What the Sadducees believed in was the ongoing continuity of God's people from one generation to another generation through children. That there was the progeneration of the people, not through an eternity of resurrection, but through another generation teaching and walking in the ways of the law. And so that's why they asked the question about, since there was no children in any of these relationships, there's nothing. And so then Jesus goes on and is going to talk about his first word is interesting. The sons of this age. Sons implies parents. But he is going to pick these sons up as not sons of people, but sons of God. And so Jesus is taking our continuity of being people, not by who our parents were in this physical world, but by the fact that we're sons of God. So in verse 36, he gets this. For they cannot die anymore because they are equal to angels and are sons of God, being sons of the resurrection. So he's going to place the people who are believers as children of God and not just children of the people who are here. And then he goes on and talks about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so he does two things. He highlights that people are children of God by being people of the resurrection. And then the second thing he does is he highlights that God is not the God of the dead, but the God of the living. And he is, as Moses said, the God, he doesn't say the God that was with the God of Abraham in the past, but Jesus points out to say that Moses commenting God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and God of Jacob is a confession that he is still the God of Abraham. He's still the God of Isaac, still the God of Jacob, which then places Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the identity of being living and not dead. This fits in with Hebrews chapter 11, 10 and 11, where Apollos maybe, we don't know exactly who wrote Hebrews, but that the idea is that the people of the Old Testament are people of the resurrection because they were people who had faith in God continuing to work even where there was death.
Pastor?
Yeah.
The explanation given for verses 27 through 30 is interesting. Jesus demonstrates that the Lord is the God of the living. The patriarchs, though dead from an earthly perspective, are still alive with God. One human reason dare not come between us and God are promises. Jesus' certain resurrection shows that he is our living God and hope for life.
Jesus is our hope for life. Let's end there. We'll pray. Oh God, grant that we would always build up our heavenly hope on the sure cornerstone that you have provided, our Lord Jesus Christ. And built up into that cornerstone, may we be a people who place our lives into the dwelling of God. Amen. Thank you all. Vibrant, wonderful discussion. And we'll see you next week.